say, wow, thank you for the lovely, lovely introduction. That was really nice. Actually, before I begin, before today, who'd here had heard of Samsung Internet, the web browser? Oh, cool, it's like a load of you. Keep your hands up. Who here tests on Samsung Internet? Right. Please do test on our web browser. We're not just like a web view or anything. We're an entire different fork of Chrome. We're one of the bigger contributors to the Chrome browser. And we try and push some of the APIs a bit further. So we tend to focus on like web Bluetooth, progressive web apps, web payments, web VR. So we're like, it's good to test out your code on our browser. Like the engine's usually like a little bit behind, but some features will be parity with the latest Chrome. So it depends on what the user's using. But yeah, please test on us. It's really cool. But personally, my focus is as a web advocate, our web VR and progressive web apps. But today I'm going to talk to you about some of the new stuff that's in web browsers. But I'm going to begin my talk with a really controversial statement to get everyone worked up. So this talk is a love letter to complexity. So when I was a kid, one of my favorite things to do was to make these incredible machines out of all the toys in my toy box. So like marbles and pipes, I would have dominoes and have everything stacked up on books. I would tie stuff together with strings. I would have rows of dolls that would fall over. And I'd build these amazing machines to do really fun things. And to me, the web is like that today. So these are the kind of machines I would build. So Rube Goldberg machines, as they're often known. So I think that's pretty cool. That was with the Web Animation API, which is one of the topics I'm going to be talking with you today with. So the web is like this toy box. We have a variety of different toys. We have 3 languages. So we have HTML, which is declarative and an XML-like language. We have CSS, which is another declarative language, but looks nothing like HTML, and it's based on the Cascade. And then we've got JavaScript, which is an interpreted language and can alter the other 2 willy-nilly. It can do what it likes. And on top of that, we have constantly new toys being added to this toy box. So the ones I'm going to focus on today are CSS Grid, web animations, I can just move around. Yeah, I'm actually not wired. Web components and CSS custom properties. So yeah, these are all humongous topics, each of which is like a 2-hour talk in their own right. And I don't have 8 hours, unfortunately. I only have, I'm down to 26 minutes. So I'm going to give you a brief overview on what each of these things are. But then what I'm going to talk about is how they can be used together to build your amazing websites. So let's start off with CSS Grid. So is anyone here using CSS Grid in production? A few of you. That's really cool. I really recommend actually giving it a go. It's you can write fallbacks for it that make sense for older browsers, but it's supported in all major modern browsers. You can just use it, no polyfills or weird stuff, anything. You can start using it, and it's amazing. And it makes life so much easier. Because you don't need a framework to use CSS Grid. CSS Grid is your layout framework. So if nothing else, that saves you 250 kilobytes from downloading Bootstrap. It kind of looks a bit like this when you code it up. So here is a typical layout from 2004, which would have been a real pain in the ass to write then, but nowadays is just, 5 lines of CSS. So I'm saying it's display grid, we have some columns to find and some rows to find, and then I'm placing the header into this grid. So it works really nicely. It's very friendly, and it's friendly enough that you can just use it out the box. You don't need some complex wrapper to do it. It's made to be descriptive. So, but not only can you place elements intentionally, but you can also use white space intentionally. Because the way we've been building the web previously is that everything just gets crammed up as far as we can allow it. But now you can place spaces and place content in a grid. You can purposefully leave bits of your grid empty to make it much easier on your users' eyes and give them a much more refreshing experience. You end up have the ability to get rid of all style elements. Sorry, all elements just used for layouts. So here I've got two divs, which are the ones which are style display flex. These semantically are useless. They don't mean anything. They're junk elements. And Grid allows us to get rid of those because the layout is defined in the CSS where it should be. And that's really cool. And this is where, sorry, I'm going to just read the quote out first. So Flexbox works from the content out, and Grid works from the layout in. And this is where the power of Grid comes from. Because no longer are we laying out our page using dummy elements and then putting in the real content and hoping it works. We're purposefully setting our layout from the start, and the content adapts to our layout. So it works together really nicely. So if you're finding that you're doing this with your CSS layouts, then CSS Grid is probably your savior. I love this quote from an article from yesterday from Jeremy Keith. He was trying to make a very complex layout, and he'd saved it to the end of his project because he was like, this is going to be a huge time investment. It was a layout that he figured would take half a day of CSS just to write, and he's really good at CSS and HTML. And then he said, well, I'll give CSS Grid a go and see what it's like. And he used CSS Grid, and it was done in 5 minutes. And that wasn't an exaggeration. It took him 5 minutes to do. So I don't want to say it's easy, but it does simplify the process a lot more. It's complex to use, but once you get used to the syntax, it makes a lot of sense. So web animations. This is another framework that's landing in the browser. So this is an animation framework. It's a JavaScript API to allow you to do animations. So currently, the way we do animations semantically in the web is using them in CSS, using the CSS animation API or using CSS transitions. But animations are often the kind of thing which are either triggered by JavaScript, or we want some JavaScript to be triggered once the animation is finished, which isn't suitable to something that's controlled entirely through CSS. So a JavaScript API makes sense here. And this JavaScript API has a similar appearance and behaves similarly to the CSS animation API, but it's in JavaScript. So here I have my ball element, and I'm animating it. So the keyframes object is a list of CSS properties that get animated to. And the keyframe options describes how the animation happens. So here I have an example where I'm going from transform y0 to transform translate y to -80 vertical height units. And I've defined this twice here because you can do it either way. You can either transform a list of properties, or you can go from a list of keyframes with many properties in them. Both work great. I personally prefer the top one, but whatever's your cup of tea, really. They're both correct. So yeah, animation. It did it, it resets at the end, and it's done. The other kind of properties we have, so you can make it go twice. You can make it go back and forth or reversed. You can even set an easing on it. So in this case, when it's going backwards, the easing plays in the opposite direction. So we get this nice physics-like effect. It's not perfectly accurate for physics. That would be an ease quad, but yeah, no. Can't remember the name because I'm on stage, but I think I have it written down later. Yeah. So this is this scary looking JavaScript code is something that's really cool about it. So has anyone here used async functions in their JavaScript code before? Awesome. OK, this is like many more hands than before. So async functions are really cool because they allow you to wait for promises to finish before you continue running the code. So it allows you to write asynchronous code in a synchronous format, including like controls and other stuff. So here we're waiting for the animation to finish. The .finish property is a promise that resolves once the animation has completed. So wait for one animation to finish, wait for the next to finish, wait for the third to finish, and then find all the dominoes, animate those, and wait for each one to finish before making the next one full. So this is literally code that's copy and pasted out of my web animation demo from earlier. It looks really neat and allows you to do complex animations which are chained together in a really nice way. Because, the latest versions of JavaScript make asynchronous code really beautiful looking now. By the way, this isn't transpiled either. This is something you can do in modern browsers because I'm lazy and don't have a build step in anything. All right, web components. Web components are really cool. Who here is using a web component in something? Wow, that's like no one. Web components are fantastic. They're really, really powerful. You can use them today. They have pretty good support, but there is a polyfill which gives it great support, like really fantastic support. So if you want to start using web components today, you can use the polyfill. Oh, Web Animation API is also pretty well supported and also has a polyfill that's really good. But yeah, anyway, web components. Polyfill, really good, yes. So it allows you to make your own HTML elements because often we know what we need better than the browser manufacturers. So the one restriction is that all the new HTML elements you make have to have a dash in the name. So my dash car, beautiful dash pony, special dash button, FT dash something. You get the idea. Have a dash, use it for cool name spacing or descriptions or whatever. Yeah, it's cool. So one of the key features of web components is this property known as the shadow DOM. So the shadow DOM allows you to hide HTML elements inside your custom element. So if you write code which looks like complete div soup, you have divs and spans everywhere, none of it's semantic, and it's all pretty gross looking, you can put it inside the shadow DOM. And you can put stuff like script tags and any kind of stuff in the shadow DOM, and it all gets encapsulated and doesn't break out and affect the rest of the document. If you put, and gets rid of div soup. So the really cool thing about it is if you put a link tag that links to a style sheet, link rel style sheet, href equals, or you have a style tag, it's encapsulated to your web component. It doesn't break out and pollute the rest of the DOM. So you don't have to do any horrible naming schemes to make sure your content actually fits in the page, to make sure your CSS doesn't pollute the rest of your page. You can write boring, normal-looking CSS, like div should be blue, span should have font family Comic Sans, and it won't make all divs in your page blue and change all your spans to Comic Sans. It's trapped in the component. Also, the CSS, quite a lot of the CSS from your page won't make it into your web component either. So I should put web component example in here. Well, it all is web components, but oh yeah, my slide deck is built on all the stuff I'm talking about. I'll show you the source code. I'll put it on Twitter later. It's really cool. But the styles from the rest of your page won't break into your web components and change what they look like. So you can build styles in your web components and know they'll work the same everywhere, regardless of what page you put them in. And the final thing which they have, which is really cool, is they have JavaScript callbacks. So you can listen for the element being added to a page, removed, or the attributes being changed. This is really handy for starting and stopping loops, like cleaning stuff up, getting rid of stuff, which means that if you want to use it with any other library, you can start treating your web components just like any normal HTML. You can add or remove your web components with as much thought as you'd add or remove an image. So they become these like Lego bricks of code, which you can just start placing together to build up your apps. It's really nice and it's really cool. It's a beautiful pattern. But because it is just HTML, you don't have to suddenly like kick your current stack to the curb and be like, no, we're doing web components now because Ada's persuaded me how awesome web components are. You can start changing it bit by bit. Build a few web components. Be like, this bit of logic is perfectly suited to be encapsulated. Build a web component and include it in your app. And you can just keep doing that bit by bit until all your app is now web components, or at least enough that you feel comfortable with it. So it's not like an all or nothing situation. Like, play it by ear. Cool, and finally, whoa, I'm low on time, I need to go through this quickly. CSS custom properties. CSS custom properties are super, super amazing. They're kind of like variables for CSS. So here I have color cyan, which in this case is the color in the top right of the slide. And I'm using my background is var color cyan. So nice descriptive names of what stuff is rather than having to have a CSS precompiler to have a similar effect. You can also use them with calc to do stuff that's kind of smart. So here the margin on my P should be 5 times the general padding unit I'm using on my page. And the really nice thing is that it works within the cascade. So the padding variable, the root of my document is 5 pixels, but anything in my main, the padding variable has been overwritten to 3 pixels. So P's outside of my main will have a margin of 25 pixels. Yes, maths on the fly. Padding margins in the main will be 15 pixels. So that's pretty nice. This is really, really cool stuff. So it's the pattern which I've been playing with a bit, and it just feels super powerful, and I kind of love it. So I don't let myself put any properties in my media queries. The only things I will allow myself to change in the media queries are variables, custom CSS properties. So my media queries all end up being super descriptive of what they're doing. So I'm changing my padding to 30 pixels on desktop, 15 pixels on medium screens, and 5 pixels on mobile. And it's the kind of thing that you can work for everything. And it just feels good. It just ends up being really nice and descriptive. Cool, so now I'm going to go on to the next stage of my talk where I describe how all this stuff works together, because these are all cool and powerful individually, but this is where it gets super slick and amazing. So web components and custom properties. Custom properties pierce the shadow DOM. I said earlier that stuff from outside the shadow DOM doesn't affect the stuff into it. Well, custom properties are one of the exceptions. So this allows you to have your custom element access properties from outside itself. But this may seem like a bit useless because it means that every page you use a custom element on has to also have this CSS. Well, you can also put the custom properties in there. And because it works through the cascade, when it hits your variable, it's going to be like, this should be 10 pixels. And then you haven't got a problem with your page affecting the inside of your web component. But the really nice thing about by doing that, see, I've got the custom property in the host part of my shadow DOM style. if I set my var on my custom element, it then overwrites this and allows me to set it to what I want. So this allows me to control select bits of my CSS from outside the element itself. And you don't have to put it on the element itself. You can also just include it in your page's style sheet. So here we have a default value of 10 pixels for the custom element. But then in the style sheet itself, I want, no, on this page, it should be 20 pixels. And this is because when I authored my web component, I said, yeah, it has a default value, but it's OK to let the user or let the developer set it to something else. So CSS Grid and web components. So this is really nice. So CSS Grid is really good at getting rid of our layout elements. Web components allow us to get rid of all of the junk appearance-based elements we have inside our shadow DOM. So you combine it together, and you have really semantic-looking HTML where everything does what it's supposed to do. Your HTML file becomes the source of truth for your web app. So you write your app as it's supposed to behave in your HTML file or in your HTML template. Then if something's not working, like if the layout is incorrect, you have a mistake in your CSS grid. If the components aren't behaving correctly, you have a problem in your web components. But you can always look back to your HTML file and see what's actually supposed to be happening. So your HTML just goes from being some kind of render target for React to being an actual source of truth and configuration for your entire web app, which is amazingly powerful. That's just super cool. I love it. Like, sorry, so I should warn you, I really, really love HTML. It's my favorite programming language. Like, I think it's the best thing ever. And when you bring it together, your HTML really means something. It gives new powers to HTML, and it just feels so good, and your code looks beautiful. Oh, I love this stuff. Sorry, I have a captive audience, so I can geek out about this stuff, and like, you can't escape. It's fantastic. So yeah, CSS Grid and custom properties. So this is pretty nice. Sorry, it's a bit small. The next slide has like a lot of code on it. So here is a simple grid. So my grid is just 5 columns. Well, it's 5 columns by default, but because I'm using like var grid columns in my grid template columns definition, in my media query, I'm updating it to 1 column. So when you're on mobile, everything goes in a line, and when you're on a big screen, you get 5 columns. Very simple example. I just thought that was pretty neat. This is really, really neat, though. I'm really pleased with this. Sorry, I'm very self-congratulatory here. I love all this stuff. So grid layouts can get pretty complicated. So this is 2 pretty complicated layouts. One for mobile, where my header elements go in the sushi box. My side elements go in the burrito. My main content goes in the fish, and my footer goes in the picture of the environment. It was too long to have it all just written out, and it looked prettier. Because you can use emojis in CSS, and that's a cool thing you can do. But I want to change my layout in my query selector, but I don't want to have this huge, complex layout description just paste to arbitrary points in my CSS file. That's not neat and beautiful. I want to have it all at one point at the top of my page. So that's where custom properties come in. I can have them all defined at the top, and then I can change my template depending on the size of the page. And that's pretty neat. So yeah, custom properties and web animations. This one's nice. Well, they're all nice, but I kind of like this one. Cubic, that was it. That was the one that's a bit more. Actually, no, it's not. It's quadratic, quad, I think. Anyway, so in my opinion, easing functions are a property of style, not like code. So they should be kept in your CSS. So they can be used in your CSS transition animations. but I also want to be able to reuse them in my web animations. So here I've defined all my cubic Beziers as custom properties for me to use later in transitions and animations. But here, I can pull them out of my CSS file and use them in JavaScript. So I'm using getComputedStyle to read the styles currently set on the document element. And then I can use .getPropertyValue to read my custom property and use it in my web animation. So this is like a pretty simple example. I'm just like keeping all my easings in my CSS file, which is just a personal stylistic choice, which is great. But there's some really nice stuff. Like you can, so there's the prefers reduced motion media query, which I can't remember how well that's supported, but you can listen for that and use it to set the duration of your animations to 0 so they happen instantaneously. And then you can still listen for the callbacks for them to finish, just the callbacks will fire instantaneously, which is really nice. You can also let users slow down the animations on the page if they prefer slow animations to no animations. So by adding a slow anim class to my body, now all animations will take twice as long because I'm like using getPropertyValue dir factor for my duration. So it's pretty neat, and it allows like us to combine media queries and JavaScript in a pretty neat way without using like the JavaScript equivalents to remake your CSS media query logic in JavaScript. And it would be really nice if we could do this. This would be really, really cool. Unfortunately, we can't do it quite yet. It's still, we can't do it quite yet because CSS doesn't know what those properties are. It doesn't know, it might assume they're a color, even if you've called it X coordinate. What we need to do is tell it it's a length, so it can animate it accordingly. Because that's the nice thing about CSS, you can mix units because it's aware of what stuff should be. So by registering this as a length, we would then be able to animate this. Unfortunately, this, the CSS.registerProperty function, method even, isn't widely available yet. I think it's like the very latest Chrome. It'll be landing soon. It's really cool. It's basically the Houdini, like, is Houdini ready yet? It's basically my homepage on my web browser. And I'm just like, check it every day. I want that so much. Because that would be really neat and really beautiful. But aside from this, like pretty much everything else here, you can do today because my slide deck has just done it in front of you right now. And I'm not even using like latest Firefox. I'm using just Firefox 60, which was the latest one, but it's not like a weird developer release or anything. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. I really hope you look at all the toys you've just been given in the web and you start building your own Rube Goldberg machines in the web and have fun and enjoy it.